Please, I can't run. I can't even stand. Please don't hurt her. She was on the floor of the diner, both knees, one bleeding palm, her bad leg twisted sideways beneath her. And the man standing 3 feet away, the man every person in that city crossed the street to avoid, was staring down at her with an expression that nobody in that room had ever seen on his face before. Not fear, not contempt, something older than both. Something that looked dangerously close to breaking. Damian Cross had walked in to collect a debt. He had not walked in to feel anything. And yet here he was, feeling everything. Duh. If that already hit you somewhere deep, hit subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Stay with me all the way to the end. Because what happens next, nobody in that diner saw it coming. And neither will you. Evelyn Carter was not the kind of woman who asked for help. Not anymore. Not since the accident. Not since the surgery that was supposed to fix everything and fixed almost nothing. Not since she handed in her paramedic badge and picked up a waitress apron and decided that survival, quiet, invisible, uncomplaining survival was the only version of life still available to her. She had 2 rules she lived by now. Keep moving, keep smiling, and never under any circumstances let them see you hurting. For 2 years, those rules had held. 2 years of 9-hour shifts on a leg that felt like barbed wire wrapped around bone. 2 years of bracing against counters and bathroom walls and the inside of her car door for just long enough to breathe through the worst of it, then walking back out like nothing had happened. 2 years of watching younger, faster women on the floor and telling herself that steady was better than fast. That stubborn was its own kind of strength. She had almost started believing it. Then the door opened. Shut up. It was a Thursday. Late. The storm that had been threatening all week had finally started making good on its promises, rain coming down in long, slanted sheets against the windows. The diner was quiet the way a room gets quiet when people are tired and cold and just want to eat something warm and go home. Martha was in the back working through paperwork she'd been avoiding for days. Lila, the youngest girl on staff 18, still startled by loud noises, still apologizing for things that weren't her fault, was restocking the condiment shelf behind the counter and humming something soft and off-key. Evelyn was clearing table 7 when the door opened. She didn't look up immediately. She heard the click of the latch. She heard footsteps, multiple, deliberate, unhurried. She heard the particular quality of silence that falls over a room when everyone stops talking at the same time without agreeing to. That silence made her look up. 3 men, dark coats, the posture of people who had never needed to justify their presence anywhere. The one in front moved through the diner like the space already belonged to him. He didn't look around, didn't scan for a seat. He simply walked to table 4, the corner table best sightline to the whole room, and sat down. No menu, no greeting, no eye contact with anyone. Evelyn set down her tray. Her hands were still, but her chest had gone tight in a specific way she recognized, the way it used to go tight on scene 30 seconds before something got very bad very fast. Old habit, she told herself. It's nothing, just men having a bad night. She picked the tray back up. She was wrong. Martha came out of the back in under 10 seconds. Evelyn clocked at old paramedic habit. She was still counting things without meaning to. Time, distance, exits, threats. She counted Martha's steps across the floor and watched the color leave Martha's face between step 3 and step 5. And by the time Martha reached the table and said, "Mr. Cross," in a voice that was holding itself together by sheer will alone, Evelyn already knew. She knew the name. Everyone in this part of the city knew the name. Damian Cross. She kept her face completely neutral and moved slowly toward the counter. Not fleeing, just repositioning. Putting herself closer to Lila without making it obvious. Close enough to matter, far enough not to provoke. "Sit down, Martha." Cross's voice was unhurried, almost pleasant. The kind of voice that doesn't need volume because the room is already doing the work for it. Martha sat. 3 months, Cross said. "I've been generous. You know I have been generous. But generosity is not an open account." He tilted his head. "How much longer do you need me to wait?" Martha's hands pressed flat against the table. Evelyn could see them trembling from 15 feet away. "Please, my husband's treatments just ended. I've cut everything I can cut. I'm working every shift I am trying to." I know what you're doing, Cross said. Not unkind, not cruel, just final. I know exactly what you're doing, Martha. I know your husband's name. I know which oncologist treated him. I know what's left on the hospital payment arrangement and what's already past due on the credit line you used to cover the last round of chemo. He paused. I know everything about your situation. That's why I'm here personally, because I wanted to have this conversation like a human being before it became something neither of us wants. Martha's breath cracked. She didn't cry. She was too scared to cry. But her breath came out in one jagged, involuntary piece, and Evelyn heard it from across the room, and something behind her ribs pulled tight like a wire. Don't, she told herself. Stay where you are. There is nothing you can do here. Stay. Still. Quiet. She stayed. She was still. For about 40 more seconds. Then Lila dropped the bottle. It wasn't dramatic. A small glass bottle of hot sauce slipping from fingers gone stiff and clumsy with fear, hitting the tile behind the counter with a sharp, bright crack. The kind of sound that means nothing in a normal room and means everything in a room already stretched to breaking. One of Cross's men turned toward the sound. Then he kept turning, past the spilled sauce, past the counter, toward Lila, who had gone completely white and pressed herself back against the shelving unit and whispered, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. The man didn't say anything. He just started moving toward one, slow, easy. The way you move towards something you are not afraid of. The way you move towards something small. Evelyn was already gone. She didn't think about it, didn't weigh it. Her body moved the way it used to move on scene, direct, fast, before the thinking brain could veto what the instinct brain already knew had to happen. She was between Lila and the man before he'd covered half the distance, her arm out, her chin up, her voice already coming. She's fine. It was an accident. She's not a problem. The man stopped, looked at her with the slow, assessing gaze of someone deciding whether a thing in his way is an obstacle or a joke. Then her leg gave out. The knee buckled. Not partially, completely. The joint folded and her foot caught wrong on the tile, and for one terrible second, she was grabbing at air at nothing at the counter, edge she was already too far from, and then she was down. Both knees, one palm. The impact went up through her arms and shoulders, and the sound of it, that hard, ugly crack of a person hitting a floor, cut through every conversation and every silence in the diner and made 3 separate people flinch. She heard Lila make a sound she would remember for a long time. She heard Martha say her name like a prayer and a curse at the same time. She did not hear the man who had been advancing, because he had stopped. And then she heard footsteps, not the advancing man, softer, more controlled, coming toward her from the direction of table 4. She looked up. Damian Cross was crouching in front of her, not looming, not standing over her with his hands in his pockets like she was something to step around. Crouching, down at her level, elbows on his knees, hands loose, looking at her with an expression that didn't match anything she'd expected to find on the face of a man like him. He looked like someone had just punched him somewhere that didn't show. Stop, he said quietly. Stop trying to get up. I'm fine, Evelyn said. You're bleeding. I've bled before. That's not... He stopped. Something moved across his face, a flicker of something that came and went too fast to name. That's not the point. She looked at him. Really looked. Her arms were still braced against the tile, and her leg was screaming, and she was on the floor of her place of work in front of a man who could end careers and lives and debts with a single phone call, and something about the way he was looking at her made her forget for just 1 second what she had been about to say next. She said the only thing left. Please, her voice came out quiet, not performed, not calculated, just real and small and exhausted in the way only honest things are. Please don't hurt her. She's 18. She dropped something. That is all she did. Cross looked at Lila for a long time, then he stood up. He turned to his man, the one who had been advancing, and said one single word in a tone that was quieter than anything else he'd said all night. Back. The man backed up without a word. Cross looked at his second in command, a sharp-faced man near the door named Victor Hale, who was watching the entire scene with the controlled, coiled energy of someone who is professionally angry and choosing to save it. Their eyes held for a moment. Victor's jaw moved once like he was biting down on something. Cross looked away. Help her up, he said quietly. I don't need help, Evelyn said, already pushing herself upright. I know you don't, Cross said. I'm saying it anyway. She got herself up, alone, the way she always did. It took longer than she wanted and hurt more than she showed, and she had to grip the counter with both hands for the first 5 seconds before she could trust her leg again. The whole diner watched her do it. That particular quality of attention, the kind that felt like exposure, sat on her skin like something she wanted to brush off. She did not brush it off. She stood up straight. She looked Cross in the eye. He said nothing. Then he turned back to Martha Green. But what's the total, he said. Martha blinked. The question made no sense to her yet. What? Everything, not just what you owe me, the debt, the credit line, the hospital arrangement, all of it. What is the full number? Martha's mouth opened, closed. $42,000. Cross reached into his jacket. Victor made a sound near the door. Cross didn't look at him. He pulled out his phone, made a call that lasted less than 30 seconds, and set the phone face down on the table in front of Martha. It's paid, he said. Martha stared at the phone, then at him, then at the phone again. I don't understand. You don't need to, Cross said. He stood, buttoned his jacket, looked one more time across the diner, and his gaze found Evelyn and stayed there for a beat too long. Not threatening, not possessive, just present. Like he was memorizing something he was not sure he'd see again. Then he walked out. His men followed. The door clicked shut, and the diner exhaled. Nobody moved for a full 5 seconds. Then everybody moved at once. Martha's hand flying to her mouth, Lila grabbing Evelyn's arm with both hands, 2 customers near the window looking at each other like they'd both just survived something they hadn't signed up for. Evie, Lila's voice was shaking. What just happened? What did you do? How did you? I didn't do anything, Evelyn said. You walked straight into that. I fell straight into that. That's not, Lila grabbed her harder. You could have been Evelyn, those men, they don't just. Lila. Evelyn looked at her. Get me a chair, please. My leg is done. Lila got her a chair. Martha stood in the middle of the floor with her hands over her mouth and tears running silently down her face and didn't say a word because the word for what had just happened had not been invented yet. The debt that had been crushing her for 6 months paid by the man she'd been terrified of because a waitress with a bad leg fell down and asked him not to hurt a teenager. It made no sense. It made no sense at all. And that was what scared Evelyn the most, because things that made no sense had a reason behind them, and the reason was never simple, and the people who got swept up in reasons they didn't understand were the ones who ended up paying for them. She sat with her legs stretched out and her hands quiet in her lap and tried to look like a woman who was simply waiting for the pain to pass. But her mind was already moving, running over every second of what she had seen in Damian Cross's face when he crouched down on that floor in front of her. Not contempt, not calculation, not the cold professional assessment of a man running numbers. Grief, old, heavy, unfinished grief. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that waits buried and silent until something cracks the surface and then it all comes up at once, unstoppable, because it's been waiting so long for permission. She didn't know whose grief it was or who it was for, but she recognized it. She lived with something just like it every day. She picked up her water glass, set it down. Stop, she told herself. He's gone. It's over. You fell, you asked, he left. That is all this is. But it wasn't over. 3 miles away in a room that didn't appear on any city registry, Victor Hale sat across from a man named Owen Voss. Victor's hands were very still on the table. His voice when he spoke was the controlled, razor-edged voice of a man making a decision he had been moving toward for a long time. He's exposed, Victor said. Voss poured 2 glasses, slid one across the table, said nothing. Find her, Victor said. Find out everything. Her name, her history, her family, what she owes, what she's afraid of. Because whatever she did to him tonight, he is not going to let it go. He never lets things go. Victor looked at his glass but didn't drink. And when he comes back to her, and he will come back, that woman becomes the door we walk through. Voss smiled slowly, the smile of a man who has been waiting for a door. Consider it done, Voss said. Outside, the rain kept falling, and in a 1-bedroom apartment 9 blocks from the diner, Evelyn Carter lay on top of her covers with her leg elevated and her eyes open in the ceiling above her, doing nothing to answer the questions collecting in her chest. She had done one thing tonight, one instinctive, stubborn, completely ordinary thing, put herself between a scared girl and a bad situation. She had not planned it. She had not been brave. She had simply been herself, moving the way she always moved, the way she could not stop moving, no matter how many times the floor came up to meet her. And somehow, impossibly, it had changed everything in that room. She didn't know yet what it had started. She didn't know yet that two men in a quiet room 3 miles away had just pointed themselves toward her like a gun being cocked. She didn't know yet that the mercy she had witnessed tonight was already being called weakness by the people who mattered most in Damian Cross's world. She closed her eyes, listened to the rain, tried to sleep, and felt underneath all the exhaustion and the pain and the careful practiced stillness she had built around herself over 2 years, the terrifying, unwelcome, undeniable sensation of a door she had locked a long time ago, swinging quietly open. She didn't know yet whether what was standing on the other side was hope or disaster. In a few days, she would find out. They always did. The next morning came the way bad mornings always do, too early, too bright, and full of consequences. Evelyn woke up before her alarm. Her leg had stiffened overnight into something that felt less like a limb and more like a punishment, and she lay still for a moment with her eyes on the ceiling, doing the private inventory she did every single morning before she allowed herself to move. Left hip tight, knee swollen, probably a 6 out of 10 manageable. Lower back from the fall that was new, a dull, persistent ache that told her last night had been real, and her body had not forgotten any of it. She sat up, swung her legs over the edge of the bed, stood, took 2 steps to the bathroom, gripped the sink, looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her had a bruised palm, shadows under both eyes, and the specific expression of someone who has made peace with hard things, not because the hard things stopped being hard, but because falling apart had a price she could no longer afford. She washed her face, got dressed, made coffee. Her phone buzzed before the coffee finished brewing. It was Martha. "You need to hear this before you come in." Martha's voice was low and strange, stripped of its usual warm authority. "People are talking, Evie." Evelyn leaned against the counter. "What kind of talking?" "The kind that happens when Damian Cross walks out of a room without doing what he came to do." Martha paused. "3 people who were in that diner last night have already told someone, and those someones told someone else, and now the story is all over the neighborhood, but it's not Evie. It's not the story that actually happened." "What story is it?" "That you made a deal with him." The coffee finished brewing. Evelyn looked at it. "They think I made a deal. They think you gave him something in exchange for him clearing my debt. They don't know what. They're filling in the blank themselves, and you know what people put in a blank when a man like that is involved." Martha's voice tightened. "I'm telling you because I do not want you walking into this unprepared. Some of the morning regulars, they were looking at me sideways when I opened up, like I was part of it, like we both are." Evelyn set down her mug. "Martha, we didn't do anything. I know that, you know that, but knowing and being believed are 2 completely different countries, and you know that too." She did know that. She had lived in the gap between those 2 countries for 2 years, ever since the accident, ever since the civil suit, ever since a rich man's attorney had stood up in a hearing room and turned a decorated paramedic into a woman with a grudge and a limp in a story nobody quite wanted to believe. She knew exactly what it felt like to be the person the narrative had already decided about before you opened your mouth. She picked her mug back up, drank. "I'll be in by 10, she said. "Evie." "I'll be in by 10, Martha." She hung up, stood in her kitchen, let herself feel it for exactly 30 seconds, the particular exhausting injustice of being turned into a story you didn't write, and then she set it aside the way she set everything aside neatly in a place where she could reach it later when she had the energy to deal with it properly. She had a shift to get to. She had a life to keep running. She was not going to let the neighborhood's imagination stop her from doing either. But when she walked into the diner an hour later, she felt the change in the room before she reached the door. It was in the way the morning regulars at the counter glanced up and then looked away too quickly. It was in the half second of silence that dropped over the nearest table when she walked past. It was in the way two women she had served coffee to 3 mornings a week for a year suddenly found something very interesting on their phones. Lila was behind the counter. She saw Evelyn come in and immediately moved toward her with the body language of someone who had been waiting and dreading in equal measure. "How bad?" Evelyn said quietly. Lila bit her lip. "A man came in this morning before I even unlocked the front. He said he was a friend of yours and wanted to leave a message." She held out a folded piece of paper. Evelyn took it, opened it. 4 words handwritten in clean, precise script. "We should talk. D," followed by a phone number. Evelyn stared at it for a long moment. Then she folded it again, tucked it into her apron pocket and said, "What did the man look like?" "Older. Gray hair. He didn't seem like one of the men from last night. He was polite, but his eyes were," Lila searched for the word. "His eyes were the kind of polite that isn't really polite." Evelyn nodded slowly. She had known people whose eyes worked like that. She had treated some of them on scene back when her job had been to help people without asking what they deserved. She had learned early that danger did not always announce itself with volume. She tied on her apron and got to work. She lasted 40 minutes before her brother walked in. Noah Carter was 4 years older than Evelyn and had spent most of those 4 years treating the age difference like a moral authority he had permanent access to. He was a large man, broad through the shoulders with their mother's dark eyes, and a jaw that always seemed to be clenched around something he hadn't decided yet whether to say. He came through the diner door like a man on a specific errand and found Evelyn at table 3 and did not sit down. "Outside," he said. "I'm working, Noah." "Evelyn, outside, please." She looked at his face, set down her order pad, followed him out. They stood under the narrow overhang above the diner's side door, and Noah turned to her with the expression she knew best on him, the one that was trying to look like anger because it was less frightening than what it actually was, which was fear. "Tell me what happened last night," he said. "The real version, not what's going around." "I fell. I asked him not to hurt Lila. He left." Noah's jaw tightened. "And the debt, Martha's debt, he paid it." "Why, bye?" "I don't know, Noah. People don't do that. Men like that do not do that without a reason, without a plan, without something they expect to collect later. You understand that, right?" He stepped closer. "You understand that whatever happened last night, you are now on his radar. That is not a place to be. That is the worst possible place for you to be. I didn't ask to be on anyone's radar. It doesn't matter what you asked for. It matters what you've got." He looked at her hard. "He sent someone this morning, didn't he?" It wasn't a question. Evelyn kept her face even. "A note." "What did it say?" "That he wants to talk." Noah's hand came up and pressed flat against his mouth for a second, a gesture she recognized, the one he made when he was deciding between several versions of what he wanted to say, and none of them were the right shape. "Evie, you need to not respond to that. You need to act like it never arrived, and you never read it, and you are just a woman who works in a diner and has nothing to do with any of this. And if he comes back anyway, then we figure that out then." "Noah," she looked at him steadily, "he already knows where I work. He probably knows where I live. Pretending he doesn't exist is not a strategy. It's just waiting for the next thing to happen. It's safer than engaging." "Safer for who?" Her voice was quiet, but the edge in it was unmistakable. "I have been being safe for 2 years. I have been very careful and very quiet and very small, and it has cost me everything except the absolute basics of being alive. I am not interested in trading one prison for another just because the second one has better lighting." Noah stared at her. Something shifted in his eyes, a brief, raw flicker of something she couldn't fully read. Then his jaw tightened again, and he looked away. "I just need you to be careful," he said. "I know," she said. "I will be." He left without saying anything else. She watched him walk to his truck, get in and sit there without starting the engine for a full minute before finally driving away. She didn't know what that minute was for. She told herself it was just Noah being Noah, worrying in the large, loud, inefficient way he always had. She went back inside. She served coffee. She refilled tables. She smiled the smile she had perfected over 2 years. And at 3 in the afternoon, when the diner hit its quiet middle hour, she went to the back, took the folded note out of her apron pocket, and stared at the phone number for a long time. She did not call it, but she did not throw the note away. That night, walking to her car in the parking lot behind the diner, she became aware of the black sedan before she was fully conscious of noticing it. It was parked at the far end of the lot, engine off, no one visible through the tinted windows. She told herself it was nothing, kept walking, reached her car. The sedan's window rolled down. Damian Cross looked at her from the passenger seat. "I wasn't following you," he said before she could speak. "I was here first. I thought that was better than coming inside." Evelyn stood with her keys in her hand and looked at him and worked very hard to keep every readable thing off her face. "That's a subtle distinction." "I know." A pause. "How's your leg? That's what you want to talk about." "It's where I'm starting." She looked at him. The light was low and his face was half in shadow, and he looked, she thought, like a man who had not slept well, which surprised her because she had assumed men like him didn't lose sleep over things the way regular people did. She had assumed they had some mechanism for it, some professional detachment that the rest of the world paid for in cash. He looked like a man who had been sitting with something heavy all day and hadn't found anywhere to put it down. "My leg is the same as it always is," she said, which means it works well enough and hurts more than it should, and I've made my peace with it. Cross looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "I want to offer you something, not a deal, not an exchange. I want you to hear it before you decide what it means." "I'm listening." "There's a rehabilitation center on the north side. Private, not connected to any hospital system. The best orthopedic work in the city happens there." He paused. "I've already arranged for an evaluation. No kaides, no obligation. If they can help you, they will. If they can't, you walk away and we never speak again." The parking lot felt very quiet. Evelyn said carefully, "Why?" It wasn't a question either. Cross looked at his hands for a moment, then back at her. "Because you remind me of someone I failed, and I am aware that is not your problem, and I'm not asking you to be anything to me because of it. I am just trying to do one thing correctly for once." He met her eyes. "That's all this is." Evelyn stood in the cold for a long moment. Her leg ached, her chest ached. The note in her apron said, "We should talk," and her brother's face in her memory said, "Stay small and safe." And the woman she used to be, the one who ran toward emergencies instead of away from them, the one who had never once chosen the small, safe version of anything pushed up against the inside of her ribs like something trying to get out. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I'm asking." She got into her car. She sat there for a moment after he'd gone, windows fogging slowly, and did not let herself cry, not because she wasn't feeling something, but because she had not decided yet what she was feeling, and she had learned a long time ago that you should know what you're crying about before you start. She drove home. She thought about it for 4 days. On the 5th day, she called the number. What happened next moved fast, the way things only move when momentum has been building underneath the surface long before you can see it. The rehabilitation center was everything Cross had said: clean, quiet, staffed by people who looked at her leg the way good mechanics look at an engine, not with pity, not with perfunctory sympathy, but with genuine interest in what was actually wrong and whether it was fixable. The head therapist, a woman named Dr. Ewan, who had the direct, economical manner of someone who had spent 20 years not wasting words on false comfort, walked Evelyn through the scan results on day 3 and said, "There's nerve impingement and scar tissue that nobody addressed properly after the original injury. We can work with this. It won't be fast and it won't be pain-free, but I think you will walk better than you have in 2 years if you do the work." Evelyn sat with that for a moment. "How much better?" she asked. "Possibly without the cane entirely." She did not cry in that office. She saved it for the car afterward, where no one could see, where she sat in the parking structure for 11 minutes with both hands over her mouth and let herself feel the size of it, the possibility of it, before she pressed it back down into the place she kept things that were too big to carry openly. She started the program the following Monday. Meanwhile, Noah found out. He found out the way he always found out, things that Evelyn hadn't told him from someone else first, which made it worse every single time. A mutual friend from the neighborhood said something in passing, and Noah arrived at the clinic on a Wednesday morning, looking like a man who had been driving in circles, deciding whether to come in. "You called him," Noah said. "I called the clinic," which he arranged. Which he arranged, Evelyn agreed. She was in the middle of a stretching exercise and she kept going. And the results so far are that my scar tissue is being addressed for the first time since the accident, and Dr. Ewan thinks I might not need the cane in 4 months. Noah watched her for a moment. His jaw was doing the thing. Evie. Noah, I know what you're going to say. Do you? You're going to say it's dangerous and you're right. You're going to say, I don't know what he wants, and you're right. You're going to say that people like him don't give things without expecting something back, and maybe you're right about that too. She stopped, sat up, looked at him directly. But I have been doing your version of safe for 2 years, and I have gotten progressively smaller and quieter and more invisible, and I am 34 years old, Noah. I am 34 years old, and I was afraid to stand up in a parking lot until my knee gave out, and I had no choice. So yes, I am doing this, and I need you to let me. Noah's jaw worked. He sat down heavily in the chair next to her mat. There's something I haven't told you, he said, and his voice was different now, lower, stripped of the big brother authority it usually carried. What was underneath was something older and darker, and genuinely ashamed. About how I know what these people are like. It's not just neighborhood knowledge, Evie. I need you to know that. But I'm not ready to tell you all of it yet. I just need you to trust me that there are reasons, real ones. Evelyn looked at her brother, really looked at him. She had known Noah her whole life. She had never heard him sound like that. Okay, she said carefully. I'm listening when you're ready. He nodded once, stood up, looked like a man who had just set something down that he wasn't sure he'd be able to pick back up again. He left without another word. She watched him go. She went back to her exercise. But inside, something had shifted. Something in the story she thought she knew about her own life had quietly rearranged itself, and she couldn't see the new shape yet. Only that it was different from what she'd assumed. Only that there was a version of her past she hadn't been given access to. That night, she was walking to her car after the session, just walking slowly, but walking with noticeably less drag on the left side enough that Dr. Ewan had stopped and said, "There it is," with quiet satisfaction. When she heard someone behind her, she turned. A man she didn't recognize. Medium height, expensive jacket, the particular smile of someone who is performing ease they don't actually feel. "Ms. Carter," he said, "my name is Owen Voss. I think we should have a conversation about the people you've been spending time with lately." His smile didn't move. "For your own protection, of course." Evelyn stood very still. "I don't know you," she said. "No," Voss agreed pleasantly, "but I know quite a lot about you. And I think if you understood the full picture of what Damian Cross is and what he's already decided to do with you, you'd feel differently about this generous little arrangement he's put together." He took one step forward. "All I'm asking for is 20 minutes of your time." Evelyn looked at him, at the smile that wasn't a smile, at the step that was 2 inches too close to be friendly, and 2 inches too careful to be threatening in any way she could name. She thought about Dr. Ewan saying, "There it is," when she walked without the drag. She thought about Noah's voice going low and ashamed in a way she'd never heard it before. She thought about a man crouching on a diner floor looking at her like she was something he had lost and was not sure he deserved to find. She gripped the strap of her bag. "No," she said simply. She walked past him to her car. She did not run. She did not look back. But her hands were shaking when she got in and locked the doors, and she sat there for a moment with her breath coming faster than she wanted it to, and she thought, this is not over. Whatever she had stepped into the night of the storm, she was still stepping through it. The floor was not solid yet, and the men arranging themselves around her, protecting her, threatening her, needing her for things she didn't fully understand were not done making their moves. She started the car. She drove. She did not call Damian Cross that night. But she saved Voss's face to memory the way she used to save everything on scene sharp exact without sentiment. Because she had been in enough bad situations to know the difference between the moment before something happens and the moment it's already happening. And this was still the moment before, which meant she still had time. She intended to use it. She didn't tell Damian about Owen Voss that night or the next morning. She turned it over in her mind the way she turned over everything uncomfortable, carefully from every angle, looking for the version of it that made the most sense before she committed to a response. She had learned that from 2 years of managing pain. Don't react to the first wave. Wait for the second. The second wave tells you what you are actually dealing with. But she did not have to wait long. 2 days after Voss appeared in the clinic parking lot, Dr. Ewan called her into the office before her session and closed the door, which Dr. Ewan had never done before. "Someone came by yesterday afternoon," Dr. Ewan said. Her voice was careful, measured, the voice of a woman choosing precision over comfort. "He said he was a family friend and wanted to discuss your treatment progress. He was not on your contact list. I told him nothing and asked him to leave." She paused. "He left, but he stood outside for 11 minutes before he did." Evelyn felt the cold move through her before she could stop it. "What did he look like?" Dr. Ewan described Owen Voss down to the expensive jacket and the smile. Evelyn sat with that for a moment. Then she said, "Did he threaten anyone?" "No, he was perfectly polite." Dr. Ewan looked at her steadily, "Which is exactly what concerned me." Evelyn thanked her, went into her session, and moved through every exercise with the controlled focus of a woman who needed her body to do what her mind could not be quiet. Be still. Stop spinning long enough for her to think. She was getting better. That was the undeniable, infuriating, complicated truth. 6 weeks in, and the drag on her left side had reduced by something she could feel in every step. Dr. Ewan had started using the word progress without qualifying it. The cane, which had been constant for 2 years, had started waiting in the corner on good days. And good days were becoming more frequent. She should have felt purely grateful. Instead, she felt exposed, because every step forward was also a step further into the story she had not chosen. Every improvement tied her more visibly to the man who had made it possible. And Voss coming to the clinic twice now, if you counted the parking lot, meant the story had already decided she was a character in it, whether she wanted to be or not. After her session, she called Damien. He picked up on the second ring. "Evelyn?" Just her name. No greeting, no preamble. Like he had been waiting for the call and did not want to waste time pretending otherwise. "Owen Voss," she said. A short silence. Then, "Where?" "Clinic parking lot 4 days ago, and inside the clinic yesterday asking Dr. Ewan about my treatment." The silence this time was different, thinner, the kind of silence that has something moving underneath it. "He didn't touch you," Cross said. Not a question, he was running through it. "No, he was very polite." "Oh," she paused. "He said he wanted to tell me the full picture of what you'd decided to do with me." His words. "And you said," "I said no, and I walked to my car." "Good." His voice shifted, something tighter, entering it, something that was pulling itself under control in real time. "Evelyn, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Voss is not someone who makes social visits. If he's coming to you directly, it means he's already decided that you are the most efficient route to what he wants, which is you, which is me destabilized, which is me making mistakes," he paused, "which is apparently working because I am currently deciding between 3 different responses to this, and none of them are calm." Despite everything, Evelyn almost smiled. Almost. "What do you need from me?" "Tell me everything," he said, "every word, every pause." She told him. She had a good memory, another leftover from her old job trained into muscle, and she gave him the conversation in order exact without editorializing. When she finished, Cross was quiet for a moment. "He's testing how much you know," Cross said. "He wants to know if I've told you anything. If he can use you, he will. If he thinks I haven't told you enough to be useful, he'll try to fill in what he considers the relevant details himself. His version." "His version of what?" Another pause, longer than the others. "I'll tell you in person," Cross said. "Tonight, if you're willing. There are things I should have said already." She agreed. "Oh." They met at a quiet place he arranged, not his territory, not neutral in any way she could identify, but away from the clinic, away from the diner, away from the neighborhood where the story had already calcified into a version she had no control over. She sat across from him and looked at the man she had been trying to categorize for 6 weeks and continued to fail at it. He told her about his sister. He didn't build up to it or frame it carefully. He just said it flat and direct, the way people say the things that have been sitting heaviest. "I had a younger sister named Clara. She had a condition that affected her mobility from the time she was 9 years old. She walked with a cane. She was in pain most of the time, and she never talked about it. She was the most quietly stubborn person I have ever known." He stopped. "She died 8 years ago. Preventable causes. a combination of things that could have been addressed if we'd had access to better care, better resources, and if the people around her had paid attention. His voice didn't crack. It was flat and hard the way pavement is flat and hard because something enormous is buried underneath it. She was 22 years old. Evelyn said nothing. She let it sit. I built everything I have after that, Cross said. Not for her, there was no for her anymore. For me. Because I needed something to point my anger at, and building an empire is cleaner than the other options. He looked at his hands on the table. I told myself I had made my peace with it. I told myself that for years. And then you fell on that floor and said, please don't hurt her, and he stopped, started again. You sounded like her, not your voice, something else, the way you moved towards something dangerous because walking away would have required a version of yourself you couldn't be. Evelyn breathed slowly. I am not your sister, she said quietly. I know that. I need to know that you know that. I do, he met her eyes. That's why I'm telling you. Because you deserve to know what this is and isn't and what I expect and don't expect. I'm not trying to save you. I'm not trying to replace something I lost. I am trying to do one specific thing correctly. Help one person who should have had access to help 2 years ago. And apparently that is more threatening to the people around me than anything I have done with violence in the last decade. The honesty of it landed somewhere she hadn't expected. She sat with it for a moment. Then she said, Victor Hale. Cross's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. He doesn't like me, Evelyn said simply. Victor doesn't like anything that introduces variables he can't control. He thinks I'm a liability. He thinks you're a door that I left unlocked. Cross paused. He's working with Voss. I don't have proof yet, but I know Victor and I know Voss, and I know the shape of what they're doing, even if I can't see all of it. His jaw was tight. I am handling it. Without telling me. I was trying to keep you out of it. By keeping things from me. Her voice was even, not angry, pointed. Cross. They are already at my clinic. They are already in my parking lot. I am already in it. Keeping things from me does not protect me. It just means I'm navigating blind. He looked at her for a long moment. Something in him shifted. She could see it, not dramatically, not all at once, but visibly. The way a locked thing opens, not with a bang, but with a slow, certain click. You're right, he said. She hadn't expected him to say that. She held the surprise carefully and didn't show it. Tell me everything, she said. He did. It took a long time. She asked questions, and he answered them without deflection, which surprised her more than once because she had expected the version men like him usually gave shaped, curated, carefully true. Instead, she got the actual version. Victor had been building a case for 6 months that Cross had gone soft. Voss had been waiting for an entry point. The diner had given them both what they needed, a public act of mercy that could be reframed internally as weakness. And Evelyn had become the symbol of it, the woman who had walked into the most feared man in the city and walked back out with his money in her hands, whether that was how it happened or not. They want to use me to get to you, Evelyn said. Yes. And the way to use me is to make you feel like I'm in danger. Or to actually put you in danger, which comes to the same thing from their perspective. She absorbed this, steadied it into something she could hold without panicking. What does that look like when it happens? I don't know yet. That's the honest answer. He looked at her. I need you to not go anywhere alone at night. I need to put someone on the clinic. No, Flynn. I will not walk into that building followed by a man in a dark coat. Those women in there are trying to heal. I will not bring that energy into their space. She held his gaze. Put someone outside if you have to, not inside. And you will tell me every time there's something I should know. We are not doing the thing where you make decisions about my safety without my input. He was quiet for a moment. Agreed, he said. She nodded once, picked up her coffee, drank. They stayed another 20 minutes, and it was different from every conversation they'd had before, less guarded on both sides. Something that might have been called trust if either of them had been willing to use that word yet. When she left, she felt a specific uncomfortable sensation of someone who has just gone further into something than they originally planned. Not recklessly, deliberately, with open eyes. It did not feel like a mistake, but it felt like a line crossed. She was 3 blocks from her apartment when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She answered, "You spoke to him tonight." It was Voss, calm, pleasant, utterly certain. "I'm not angry about it. I just want you to know that I already know." She kept walking, kept her breathing even. "What do you want, Mr. Voss?" "I want you to understand that Cross is not the only person watching out for your well-being." He paused. "Your brother, Noah, I understand he came to the clinic last week. He's a good man, your brother, trying very hard to protect you." Her feet stopped moving. She stood on the sidewalk and felt the cold again, the specific, precise cold of a threat that hasn't named itself yet. "What about my brother?" she said. "Nothing specific. Just family is complicated, isn't it? People carry histories that the people they love don't always know about. Things done in harder times. Choices made when the options were very limited." Another pause, just long enough to be deliberate. "I think you should ask Noah about Marcus Webb. I think that conversation is overdue." The line went dead. Evelyn stood completely still for a moment. Then she turned around and walked directly to her brother's apartment, which was 6 minutes away, and knocked on his door without calling first. Noah opened it. He looked at her face and immediately stepped back. "What happened?" "Marcus Webb," she said. The name hit him like a physical thing. She saw it, saw the color drain and the jaw lock in the specific terrible stillness of a man who has just heard the thing he has been dreading for years, finally said out loud by the wrong person. "Come inside," he said. She came inside. She sat. She looked at him. And Noah Carter, who had spent 15 years protecting his little sister from everything, including the truth, sat down across from her and put his face in his hands and said, "I was 23. I need you to know I was 23 and I thought I was out of options." "Tell me," Evelyn said quietly. He told her. He had worked briefly for less than a year as a peripheral contact inside a distribution network. Not Cross as a different organization, one that had since dissolved. He had not been violent. He had not hurt anyone. But he had passed information. He had looked the other way on specific transactions in exchange for money that paid their mother's rent when she was sick and Evelyn was 16 and there was nothing else. He had gotten out. He had spent 15 years building something clean on top of it. He had believed, genuinely believed, that it was buried. Evelyn listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, the apartment was very quiet. "Does Cross know?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." Noah looked up at her. His eyes were red in the way of someone who has been holding something too long, and the act of finally putting it down is physically painful. "Evie, I tried to get you away from all of this because I was afraid they would use it. I was afraid someone would find it and use it to get to you or to him or—" "You were afraid," she said, "and instead of telling me the truth, you made decisions for me based on something I didn't know." He didn't answer because there was no answer that helped. "When Voss came to you," she said carefully, "did you talk to him?" Noah's silence lasted 1 second too long. Evelyn felt it drop through her like ice water. "Noah. He came to me first, before the parking lot, before the clinic. He came to me and he said that if I helped him understand your relationship with Cross, just your movements, just what you talked about, nothing dangerous, nothing that would hurt you, he said he would make sure the history stayed buried." The room was very quiet. "He said it was to protect you," Noah said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I told myself it was to protect you." Evelyn sat with that, sat with all of it, the weight of it, the specific shape of being loved by someone whose fear had made them dangerous, the way the best intentions could become the worst betrayal without ever crossing the line that was labeled betrayal. She looked at her brother. She had never in her life wanted to walk out of a room more than she did in that moment. She stayed. "Did you tell him anything?" she asked. "I told him you went to meet Cross tonight." Noah's voice broke on the last word. "That's all. I said that's all I'd give him, and I hung up. But Evie, that means he knows you told Cross about him, and he knows Cross knows." "I know what it means," Evelyn said. She stood up. Noah reached for her arm. "Evie, please, don't." She stepped back, not in anger, in something harder than anger, something that was trying to hold itself together because falling apart in this moment would cost too much. "I need you to tell Cross's people exactly what you told Voss and when. Tonight. Because whatever is coming next, the people trying to keep me safe need complete information." "Can you do that?" Noah nodded. He looked like a man who had been carrying a building on his back and watched it collapse anyway. I love you, she said, and I cannot talk to you right now. She left. She was halfway down the block when her phone buzzed. A text from a number she now recognized as one of Cross's security team, Ms. Carter. Mr. Cross needs you to go home now and stay inside. Something is developing. She texted back, Voss already knows I met with Cross tonight. Noah told him, 3 seconds. Then Cross himself, I know. Get inside, now. She started moving faster. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that wasn't empty, that was full of things paying attention. She had felt this before on scenes that were about to turn in rooms that were about to change. The air had a different texture right before something broke. She was a block from her building when the van door slid open. She heard it before she saw it, the mechanical slide, the specific sound of a door built for speed. She was already turning, already pulling her cane up by instinct, when 2 men came around the back of the vehicle with the practiced ease of people who had done this before. She hit the first one across the forearm. Hard, clean. He pulled back a half second. She screamed, full volume without hesitation, because she had been trained that silence was what they counted on, and she was not giving them silence. She twisted. Her leg buckled, of course it did. It always did at the worst possible moment, and she went down on one knee, cane still up, one hand braced against the asphalt. The second man grabbed her arm. She drove her elbow back and caught him in the ribs, and he did not let go, but he made a sound that told her it had counted. Then headlights, screaming tires, a car coming fast from the north end of the block and from the south another, and she heard men's voices and her name and the sound of people moving at full speed, and then a specific voice cutting through all of it. Get your hands off her. Damian Cross, not calm this time, not controlled, something raw and absolute in his voice that cut the air like a blade and stopped both men in a way that no amount of shouting would have. What followed was fast and brutal, and she was on her knee in the middle of it, with her cane in both hands and her legs screaming, and she watched Damian move through it with the precision of a man who was not doing his job right now, who was doing something older and more dangerous than his job, something personal. He got her out. She was on her feet, barely shaking, one hand gripping his arm, because there was nothing else available when he looked at her face and she looked at his. And what she saw there was not the cool, composed face of the man from the diner. It was not the measured, careful man from their conversations. It was something broken open and still breaking, something that had rearranged itself beyond the point of being put back the way it was. He pulled her in, one arm around her, solid and absolute. She let him. Just for that moment, in the middle of the chaos, in the headlights and the shouting, she let herself be held like a person who was allowed to be held. Then she stepped back. She looked at him. Noah told Voss I met with you, she said. Her voice was steady. She had decided on steady and she was keeping it. He's been feeding them information. He didn't understand what he was doing, or he chose not to understand. But it's done. Cross's expression changed. Something moved through it, not surprise. Confirmation of something he had already suspected, landing harder because she was the one saying it. Are you hurt? He said. My knee. Nothing new. She looked at him. I need you to tell me everything now. Not some of it. Everything. Because the people around me keep making decisions based on information I don't have, and every time that happens, I end up on the ground. Cross looked at her for a long moment. The street was still loud behind them, his men moving and talking, the van bond already being handled. He looked like a man standing at the edge of something he could still turn back from, but wouldn't. Inside, he said. All of it. Tonight. She nodded. But before they moved, she looked back in the direction of Noah's apartment. Somewhere in the distance, her brother was sitting with what he'd done and what it had cost. She thought about 23 years old and no options, and a mother's rent, and 15 years of trying to be clean. She thought about love that was real and damage that was also real, and how neither one canceled the other out. She thought about all of it. Then she turned and walked forward, because she was not done yet, not even close. And the people who had decided she was leverage had made the worst mistake available to them. They had hurt her before they had finished learning what she was made of. They were about to find out. They sat across from each other in a safe house that smelled like old wood and fresh coffee, and Damian Cross kept his word. He told her everything, not the curated version, not the shaped strategic version that protected him and managed her. The actual version, the one with rough edges and bad decisions, and the specific kind of damage that comes from building an empire on top of grief and calling it strength for so long that you forget there was ever anything underneath. He told her about the network, how it started, what it became, how Victor Hale had been there from the beginning as the practical brain, to Cross's instinct, the man who could look at a situation and calculate its value without the interference of anything as inconvenient as conscience. For years that had been useful. For years Victor's coldness had been a tool Cross relied on precisely because he trusted it. He trusted it the way you trust a good lock without thinking about it until the day you find it on the wrong side of the door. When did you know he'd turned? Evelyn asked. 6 months ago. Maybe longer if I'm honest about the signs I chose not to read. Cross set down his coffee. Victor doesn't believe in loyalty. He believes in alignment of interest. For years our interests aligned. Then I started making choices he didn't understand, and he stopped seeing alignment and started seeing exposure. And Voss. Voss has been waiting for a door into my operation for 3 years. Victor gave him the door. I gave them the key by walking out of a diner without collecting what I came for. He said it without self-pity, just the flat acknowledgement of a man reading his own mistake clearly. One act of mercy and 10 years of careful work started unraveling. That is the world I built. I'm not asking you to feel sorry about it. I don't feel sorry about it, Evelyn said. I feel angry about it. She looked at him directly. Because you knew 6 months ago that Victor was compromised, and you kept it inside your own head, and meanwhile these people have been building a case around me for weeks, and nobody told me I was the case. Cross was quiet. I was managing it, he said finally. You were controlling it. That's different. Her voice was even, but her eyes were not. Managing means you share the information and work the problem together. Controlling means you make all the decisions alone and everyone else just lives inside whatever you decide. She leaned forward. I am not a variable to be managed, Cross. I am a person in the middle of something I didn't choose, and I needed the full picture from the beginning. He held her gaze. You're right. I know I'm right. I need to know you understand why my... Something in him shifted again, that same slow, certain click she'd heard before. Like a man unused to being corrected by someone he respected, discovering that being corrected by someone you respect felt different from every other kind. Because keeping you ignorant didn't keep you safe, he said. It kept you blind, and blind people get caught in things that informed people could have walked around. Yes, she said simply. Now tell me about Victor's next move. He told her that too. Victor and Voss's play was not finished with the van. The abduction attempt had been a pressure tactic designed not necessarily to succeed, but to send a message to demonstrate that Evelyn was reachable, that Cross's protection had gaps, and that those gaps would keep appearing until Cross made a choice. The choice they wanted was for him to pull back. Retreat from whatever personal territory he had started occupying in relation to Evelyn, show the city he could be pressured, show his own people that Victor's assessment was correct. Alternatively, and this was the part that made Evelyn's jaw tighten, they would escalate until the message landed. What does escalate mean in this context? She said. It means they go after the people around you instead of you directly. Martha, Lila. Cross paused. Noah. Evelyn was very still. Noah already gave them information, she said slowly. He's already used. Why would they bother with him now? Because you walked away from his apartment tonight and your face said something. Voss will read that and understand that there's a fracture. And a fracture between you and your brother is worth more to him than Noah's information ever was, because it means you're emotionally destabilized. She thought about that, hated that it was accurate, hated even more that she could see the logic of it from Voss's position, that these men understood human relationships as leverage systems, that love and damage and loyalty and betrayal were just different currencies to them, that her anger at Noah was a resource they would try to spend. Then I need to talk to Noah, she said. Evelyn. Not for him, for me. Because if I leave that fracture open, they use it, and I am done being used. She stood. Tonight, I need to see him tonight. Cross looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and said a name, and within 4 minutes, a car was arranged. She looked at him. You're not coming. I know. This is between me and my brother. I know that too. He stood, faced her. For what it's worth, what Noah did, I understand it. I've seen men do worse for cleaner reasons. He was scared, and he made a decision under pressure, and he has been paying for it since the moment he made it. That doesn't fix it, but it's true. She looked at him for a long moment. Why are you defending him to me? Because you're about to walk into a hard conversation, and I don't want you walking in harder than you need to be. The honesty of it hit her somewhere unguarded. She looked away first, which told her more about where she was with Damian Cross than she was entirely ready to examine. I'll be back in an hour, she said. She went. Noah opened the door before she knocked. He had been waiting. She could see it in every line of him, the particular exhaustion of someone who has been sitting with what they've done and cannot stop sitting with it. He looked at her face and she saw him reading it, and she watched him decide he had no defense prepared that was worth offering. Don't apologize yet, she said, stepping inside. He closed the door. Evie, listen first. She turned to face him. I know why you did it. I understand the fear. I understand the calculation. I do not understand how you could look me in the eye for 6 weeks, watch me fighting to get my life back, know that you were feeding information to the people trying to destroy that, and say nothing. Her voice was controlled and precise, and it cost her something to keep it that way. That's the part I'm sitting with, not the choice you made in a desperate moment 15 years ago. This one, the ongoing one. The one where every day you chose your fear fight over my right to know what I was walking into. Noah sat down on the couch, put his elbows on his knees. His hands hung loose between them, the posture of a man who has stopped pretending to take up space he doesn't feel he deserves. You would have tried to protect me, he said quietly, and gotten hurt doing it. You always do that. You have always done that your whole life, walked into the thing that was going to hurt you, because walking away would have required something you don't have in you. He looked up. I was trying to keep you from the moment you were in last night. But I was in it anyway, she said, because keeping me blind didn't stop the danger. It just meant I couldn't see it coming. He didn't answer, because they had already established that there was no answer that helped, and he knew it. She sat down across from him. Voss is going to try to use the fracture between us, she said. That's how these people work. They find the break in the foundation, and they push until the building falls. She looked at him steadily. I am not going to let him have it. Noah raised his eyes. I am still angry, she said clearly. I need you to understand that I am genuinely, specifically angry at you, and that it is going to take real time and real honesty in a different kind of relationship than the one we have been having, the one where you protect me by managing what I know for that anger to move. She paused. But you are my brother, and I love you, and I need you to call Cross's people tonight and give them everything, every conversation with Voss, every exchange. Dates, times, exact words. Whatever they need to close this. Noah's jaw worked. And then what? What happens to me after? I don't know, she said honestly, but whatever happens, it happens in the open, not buried, not managed, in the open where we can both see it. She stood. Can you do that? He nodded once. A small, stripped-down nod. The nod of a man who has run out of other options and is maybe for the first time in 15 years relieved about it. She left, walked back to the car, sat in the dark for a moment. She was not finished being angry. She had told him the truth about that. But the anger had shifted shape slightly from the sharp, immediate kind that makes you want to move fast and say hard things to the slower, heavier kind. That means something actually matters, and getting it wrong will cost you. The kind of anger that only exists in relationships worth keeping. She went back inside. Cross looked at her when she came in. Read her face the way she was beginning to understand. He read everything quickly, thoroughly, without asking for more than what was offered. Okay, he said. Working on it, she said. He nodded. Let it sit. Then Victor walked in. Not metaphorically, not through a phone call or a message or a second-hand account. Victor Hale walked through the door of the safe house at 11:47 at night, with 2 men behind him, in the particular expression of someone who has decided that a conversation that should have happened privately is going to happen here instead. Evelyn's first instinct was to stand. She stood. Victor's gaze moved to her for exactly 1 second, the assessing, dismissive second of a man cataloging something he has already decided is not his primary concern, and then moved across. "We need to talk," Victor said. "You walked into my space without being invited," Cross said. His voice was perfectly level. "That's already a conversation." "Your space," Victor looked around once. "Your space is getting smaller every day, Damien. You do understand that what started in a diner 6 weeks ago has cost you 6 territories worth of trust, 2 key alliances, and is currently being used by Voss to position himself as the more stable option to every independent operator in the city." He stepped forward, not aggressively measuredly, the step of a man making a logical point with his body. "I have been loyal to you for 11 years. 11 years. I am standing here because I am trying to give you the chance to correct course before it cannot be corrected." "By doing what?" Cross said. Victor's gaze moved to Evelyn again. This time it stayed. Evelyn held it. She did not look away, did not shift, did not perform the kind of smallness that the moment seemed to be asking her for. She stood exactly as she was. "By ending the association," Victor said, "cleanly, publicly, in a way the city can see and interpret correctly. You made a sentimental decision. It's been noted. It's been addressed. Everyone moves on." He paused. "It's not personal." "It's completely personal," Cross said. "Damien, you walked into a room that contains a woman who was just grabbed off the street by people working with the man you've been meeting with for 3 months." Cross said. His voice had not risen. It was, if anything, quieter, which was worse. "And you are telling me the problem is the association." He looked at Victor the way a man looks at something he has been carrying for a long time and has finally put down. "Victor, we are done." Victor's expression didn't crack. He had the professional control of a man who had been in difficult rooms for 2 decades. But something behind his eyes moved a quick calculating flicker. He was recalibrating in real time. "You're making a mistake," Victor said. "I make my own mistakes," Cross said. "That's the part you never understood. I don't need a manager. I need people I can trust. And you chose Voss." He paused. "So we're done." Victor looked at him for a long moment. Then his eyes moved to Evelyn one more time. Not threatening, something stranger than threatening, almost curious. Like a man who has been trying to understand a variable and has just accepted that he never will. "You have no idea what you started," he said to her. "I fell down," she said. "That's all I did." Something passed across Victor's face. Then he turned and walked out with his men behind him, and the door closed, and the room was quiet. Cross stood very still for a moment. Then he sat down heavily in the chair behind him. And for the first time since she had known him, he looked tired. Not the controlled, managed tiredness of a man who has decided he can afford to show it. Actually tired, the kind that goes all the way down. "He'll go straight to Voss," he said. "I know," Evelyn said. She sat down across from him. "How long do we have?" "Before he makes his next move, 12 hours. Maybe less." He pressed one hand over his mouth for a moment, thinking, running calculations. "I need to make calls. I need to get ahead of this before Voss uses Victor's departure to make his stability argument to the independents. Then make the calls." "Evelyn, I'm not leaving," she said. "Don't ask me to." He looked at her, that long reading look she had gotten used to. "I wasn't going to ask you to," he said. He made the calls. She listened to half of them and stepped out of earshot for the others, understanding instinctively which conversations were hers to be part of and which ones weren't yet. She was learning the geography of this, where her presence helped and where it complicated. That kind of learning took time she didn't have, so she was doing it fast in real time the way she had done everything in her old life. A adapt move. At 1 in the morning, Noah called. Cross's people had been with him for 40 minutes. He had given them everything, the full timeline of his contact with Voss, the exact exchanges, what he'd said, and what he'd held back. His voice on the phone to Evelyn was stripped and quiet. "It's done," he said. "Thank you," she said. A pause. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Evie," his voice caught once. Just once. "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough yet. I know it needs time, but I need to say it." "I know," she said. "I heard it." She hung up, sat with it for a moment, set it in the place where she kept the things that needed time. Cross finished his last call at nearly 2 in the morning and set his phone down and looked at her across the room. Voss is moving tonight, he said. Well, physically, he's making contact with 3 independent operators trying to consolidate before morning. My people are already ahead of 2 of them. He paused. The third one is the problem. Man named Del Santos. He's been sitting on the fence for a year, and Voss is going to offer him something tonight that I need to counter before sunrise. What does Del Santos want? Cross looked at her. What makes you think it's that simple? Because you just said Voss is going to offer him something, which means there's a specific something. So what is it? A pause, then almost something like a smile, not amused, but the expression of a man encountering a quality he didn't expect and finds he likes. Voss is going to offer him the North Distribution Agreement that he thinks he'll have access to once he's finished with me. And you can counter with the actual North Distribution Agreement. I can counter with something better. Del Santos has a daughter at St. Carmine's. There's a scholarship program. That's not better, that's a different currency. Evelyn leaned forward. Call him directly, not through intermediaries. Him personally tonight. People like Del Santos don't want brokered offers. They want to be treated like the decision makers they are. Call him directly, tell him, Voss is coming to him, and tell him exactly what that relationship will cost him when this is over. Cross looked at her. Which is what, he said carefully. Association with the losing side, she said, because Voss is overextended. He has Victor's credibility and a window of 12 hours and an operation that has been running on borrowed momentum for 3 months. That is not a foundation. That is a countdown. She held his gaze. Del Santos has survived 20 years by betting on the right side at the right time. Appeal to you that. Not the money, the track record. Cross was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up the phone and called Del Santos directly. She listened to half the conversation before she stopped needing to. At 2:47 in the morning, Damian Cross's phone lit up with a message from his operations lead. Santos is out. Voss is down to Victor and 2 contacts. He's isolated. Cross read it, set the phone down, looked at Evelyn. You did that, he said. You made the call, she said, with your strategy, with basic human logic. She stood, stretched, her back felt the ache in her knee that had been patient all night and was now submitting a formal complaint. Cross, this is what I'm saying. You have been running this operation as if the only tool available to you is force, fear, money, the architecture of control. She looked at him. But the reason Victor's argument almost worked is because your people have been watching you choose something they didn't understand, and they were afraid of what they couldn't understand. The diner wasn't weakness. It was the first clear decision you'd made in years that had nothing to do with calculation. And it terrified the people around you because they had forgotten that was possible. Cross was very still. You cannot run an empire on fear forever, she said. Not because it doesn't work. Because it works until the day it stops, and when it stops, there's nothing underneath. She paused. You know this. You knew it before I said it. I'm just the person who finally said it out loud. He looked at her for a long time. Long enough that she started to wonder if she had gone too far, if the honesty of it had landed wrong, if the man who had been carefully opening himself to truth in small increments had just reached the wall. Then he said, Clara used to say something like that. Evelyn was quiet. She used to say that strength that needs an audience isn't strength, it's theater. His voice was low and even, but it cost something. She could hear the quantum. I used to argue with her. I used to say the audience was the point. That in our world, what people believed you were capable of was the same as what you actually were. He paused. She would look at me the way you just looked at me, like she was waiting for me to hear what I was actually saying. What were you actually saying? Evelyn asked quietly. That I was afraid, he said simply, that everything I built was fear shaped like power. He looked at his hands. She saw through it from the beginning. She just didn't live long enough for me to be ready to hear it. The room was very quiet. Evelyn said, she sounds like someone worth honoring. Yes, Cross said. She was. Then honor her, Evelyn said, not by trying to save every woman who reminds you of her, by becoming the person she always knew you could be. She held his gaze. That's what she was waiting for, not for you to grieve her, for you to finally listen. Something moved across his face that was not anger and not grief and not the controlled, professional composure she had spent weeks watching him maintain. Something that had no defense around it. something that was just human. He looked at her for a long, unguarded moment. Then his phone exploded. 3 messages in 4 seconds, then a call from his operations lead that he grabbed immediately. She watched his face shift as he listened, watched the human thing recede and the operational precision return faster than she expected, which told her something about how well he had learned to move between the two versions of himself. "Voss isn't isolated," he said when he hung up. His voice was back to the flat, decisive register of a man in motion. "He made a move we didn't anticipate. Victor went to 3 of my own people, not the independents. Mine. And at least one of them is listening. Juan Reyes, my head of Eastern operations." He was already standing, already reaching for his phone again. "Reyes has been with me for 7 years. If Victor got to him, then Voss doesn't need the independents," Evelyn finished. "He just needs Reyes to create enough internal disruption that your people don't know who to follow." "Yes, and Victor knows exactly how to frame it because he spent 11 years watching you operate." "Yes." Cross looked at her. "I need to move. Now, and I need you somewhere safe while I do." "I told you, I am not asking you to disappear," he said. "I am asking you to be somewhere I can function without half my mind on you. There is a difference. There is a real specific difference between protecting you from information and protecting you from a room that is about to get dangerous in a way that has nothing to do with your ability to handle it." He looked at her steadily. "Let me protect you the right way this time. Please." Evelyn looked at him. At the please, the actual please, not a power move, not a management strategy. A request. "Why, Martha's," she said. "I'll be at Martha's. You can verify that." "I'll have someone outside." "Outside," she repeated. "Outside," he confirmed. She picked up her bag, her cane, moved toward the door. "Cross," she stopped, turned back. "When this is over, when you've dealt with Victor and Voss and Reyes and whatever comes next, I need a conversation with you. A real one, about what this is, what it isn't, and what it can and cannot be between 2 people who are telling each other the truth for the first time." She paused. "Not tonight, but soon." He held her gaze. "Yes." She left. She walked to Martha's. Her leg ached and the night was cold, and somewhere across the city, a man she trusted in ways she had not finished understanding was moving through a battle that had started because she fell on a diner floor and asked for something that cost her nothing to ask for. She thought about Victor's voice saying, "You have no idea what you started." She thought about it for a long time. He was right that she had started something. He was wrong about what it was. She had not started a war. She had not become a weapon or a wound or a strategic miscalculation. She had simply been herself in the most honest and inconvenient way possible. And apparently in the world Damian Cross had built, that was the most dangerous thing anyone had ever done. Martha did not ask questions when Evelyn showed up at her door at 3 in the morning. She just opened it wider, stepped back, and said, "Coffee or tea?" "Coffee," Evelyn said. "Strong." That was the thing about Martha Green that the neighborhood had always known and never quite found the right words for. She had the specific grace of a woman who had lived through enough to understand that sometimes people arrived at your door needing presence more than they needed explanation. She made the coffee. She sat down across from Evelyn at the kitchen table. She did not ask what was happening or how bad it was or what Evelyn was going to do next. She just stayed. And for 40 minutes, that was exactly the right thing. Evelyn sat with the warmth of the mug between both palms and let herself be still, for the first time in what felt like weeks. Not numb still. There was a difference. Numb was what happened when you stopped feeling because feeling had become too expensive. Still was what happened when you finally trusted the ground under your feet enough to stop running. She was not sure when she had started trusting the ground again. She was not sure she could have named the exact moment. But it had happened somewhere between a diner floor in a parking lot and a safe house at 2 in the morning, and it felt irreversible in the way that only real things feel irreversible. Her phone buzzed. Cross's operations lead Reyes contained. Victor in custody. Working on Voss. She exhaled slowly. Martha looked at her over her own mug. "Better getting there. You want to tell me what's been happening?" Evelyn looked at her. Martha's eyes were steady and warm and completely without judgment. The eyes of a woman who had been 3 months behind on borrowed money and had watched a feared man pay her debts because A limping waitress fell down and said, please. If anyone had earned the right to the full story, it was Martha Green. So Evelyn told her, not all of it, not the operational details, not the names and territories and the specifics of what Cross had been doing since 3 a.m, but the shape of it. The real shape, the 6 weeks of rehabilitation and neighborhood gossip, and her brother's secret, and Victor's betrayal, and Voss in the parking lot, and the van door sliding open, and what it felt like to be turned into leverage by people who saw human relationships as nothing more than a useful kind of pressure. Martha listened to all of it without interrupting. When Evelyn finished, Martha set down her mug and was quiet for a moment. Can I say something? Martha said. Please. When I was sitting at that table 6 weeks ago, and Damian Cross was telling me he knew my husband's name and my hospital arrangement and everything I owed, I was not afraid that he was going to hurt me. She paused. I was afraid because I could see that he was right, that I had borrowed from the wrong place and run out of options, and the only thing standing between me and the consequences was a version of mercy I had no right to ask for. She looked at Evelyn carefully. And then you fell, and you asked him, and he gave it. She shook her head slowly. I have been in this neighborhood for 22 years. I have seen men like him operate for 22 years. What happened that night was not normal, Evelyn. It was not a calculation. It was not strategy. She held her gaze. That man looked at you on the floor and something in him came back to life. I watched it happen. Evelyn said nothing. I'm not telling you what to do with that, Martha said quickly. I'm not telling you it's simple or safe or that the complications aren't real. I'm just telling you what I saw. She picked up her mug again. And I think you already know. I think you've known for a while and the knowing scares you more than any of the rest of it. Evelyn looked at her coffee. She did know. That was the honest answer. She had known for longer than she was comfortable admitting, and the knowing had been sitting inside her chest like something she kept meaning to deal with and finding reasons to defer. She was done deferring. Her phone buzzed again at 4:43 in the morning. Cross himself this time, not the operations lead. Voss is done. Victor is being handled. It's over. Are you okay? She looked at that last question for a moment. Are you okay? Not is the situation resolved, or are you somewhere safe? Are you okay? The distinction was small and enormous at the same time. She typed back, I'm okay. Are you 3 seconds? Working on it. She almost smiled. She slept on Martha's couch for 4 hours with a blanket that smelled like fabric softener and the specific, uncomplicated comfort of a place where someone was glad you were there. When she woke up, the sun was already high, and Martha was in the kitchen, and the smell of actual breakfast was filling the apartment, and everything outside the window looked ordinary in the specific, startling way that ordinary things look after several days of nothing being ordinary at all. She sat up, tested her leg. The knee was stiff but manageable, a 5 maybe. She had worked through worse. She got up and went to the window and stood there for a moment looking out at the neighborhood she had been living inside for 2 years. The street, the corner store, the familiar angle of the buildings, and felt something she had not felt in a long time about this particular view. She felt like she belonged to it, not trapped inside it, belonging to it. There was a difference there too, and she was finally able to feel it. Martha appeared in the doorway. Breakfast is ready. Martha. Evelyn turned. I want to come back to work. Martha blinked. You never left. I mean properly, full shifts. Not the careful, protected, doing less than I can version. She looked at her. I've been managing myself down for 2 years, running at 60% and telling myself it was responsible. I want to stop doing that. Martha looked at her for a moment. Something in her expression shifted, not surprise, but recognition. The recognition of a woman watching someone find the sentence they had been looking for a long time. Monday, Martha said, full shift. And you eat breakfast first. Evelyn ate breakfast. She called Noah at 9 in the morning. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he had not slept either. How are you? She asked. I don't know yet, he said, honest, simply honest, which was already different from every version of Noah she had spoken to in the past 6 weeks. Cross's people, did they treat you okay? They were professional, asked good questions, didn't make me feel like a criminal, which he stopped. Which I appreciated more than I expected to. Noah, she sat down on the edge of Martha's couch. I need to ask you something and I need the real answer. Okay. Did you ever, in any of your contact with Voss, any of it give them anything that puts someone in physical danger? Not information. People. Did anyone get hurt because of what you passed along? Silence. Long enough to be real deliberation rather than defensiveness. No, he said finally. I told him about your meeting with Cross. Timing, location that you'd spoken. Nothing else. Nothing that no one got hurt because of me. A pause. I need you to know I checked. After I talked to Cross's people, I went back through every conversation and I checked. Okay, she said. That's all okay, Bauha. That's all for now. She paused. Noah, I need you to talk to someone. Not me, not Cross's people. Someone outside all of this. A counselor, a therapist, someone who can help you put down 15 years of carrying something you weren't supposed to carry alone. A long silence. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, I know. I'll help you find someone if you want. Maybe. Another pause. Evie, I'm so sorry. I know, she said. I'm going to need time, but I love you and I'm telling you that clearly so you know it's still true. She exhaled. Start with the therapist. We work forward from there. She hung up. She sat for a moment. Then she got up, put on her coat, picked up her cane because it was a good day but not a no-cane day yet, and she was done pretending those were the same thing and went outside. Cross was waiting, not hovering, not positioned outside the door like a guard. He was sitting on this low wall at the edge of the sidewalk, forearms on his knees, looking like a man who had been awake for 30 hours and had decided that sitting down was the most honest available posture. He looked up when she came out and did not try to compose his face quickly, which she noticed. You should sleep, she said. I will. He stood. I wanted to see you first. She stood across from him in the morning light and looked at him. Really looked without the urgency of danger or the distraction of crisis, just looked at the man who had walked into a diner to collect a debt and walked out paying one instead, and everything that had followed from that single inexplicable act of being human. Victor, she said, cooperating. He had his own reasons for not wanting a full exposure. There are things he did under his own initiative that he would prefer stay contained. We've reached an understanding. Voss, gone, pulled out of the city as of this morning. He's a smart man, smart enough to know when a position is no longer worth holding. Cross paused. He won't come back to this. It's too expensive now. Reyes. Reyes made a choice under pressure and walked it back when the pressure changed. I know what that is. He stays on new terms. She absorbed this, steadied it, and you Cross looked at her. And me, he repeated quietly. What happens now for you, for the operation, the people, the all of it? He was quiet for a moment, not avoiding, thinking. She had learned the difference. Victor was right that things need to change, he said. Not the way he meant, not retreat, not pulling back, not showing the city that I can be pressured into smaller choices, but he paused. The empire I built runs on fear. Fear and money and the threat of what I can do to people who don't cooperate. I have been telling myself for years that this is simply the nature of the world I operate in. That everyone in it makes the same calculations and mine are simply more effective. He looked at her steadily. I don't believe that anymore. When did you stop believing it? Progressively, he said, since a Thursday night 6 weeks ago. He looked at her. You asked me to not hurt a teenager, and instead of seeing a tactical weakness, I felt something I had not felt in 8 years. Something that told me the architecture I had built was not strength. It was the longest-running avoidance strategy in the history of a man who was very good at not feeling things. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. So what do you do with that? She asked. I start making different decisions, systematically, in ways that will cost me short-term and matter long-term. He paused. I am not going to become a different person overnight. I am not going to pretend that I can undo what I've built or what I've done, but I can change the direction. He met her eyes. Clara would have said the same thing you said last night, about honoring her by becoming the person she always knew I could be. His voice was even, but she could hear what it cost him to say it. I have been dishonoring her by grieving instead of changing. She would have hated that. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. She sounds like she would have been a lot of work, she said. Cross almost smiled. It made it all the way to his face this time. She was relentless. She argued about everything. She was never once impressed by anything I did with money or power. She only ever wanted to know what I actually thought. He paused. You reminded me of that, not of her, of what she made me want to be. Evelyn held that. I need to tell you something, she said. Okay. I am not a project. I am not a second chance or a redemption arc or a symbol of something you need to resolve. She held his gaze steadily. If whatever this is between us is going to be real, and I am not saying it is, I am saying if it has to be between equals, two people being honest with each other because they want to be, not because one of them is carrying guilt about someone else and the other one is grateful for being helped off the floor. Cross did not look away. I know that, he said. I need to know that you know the difference between who I am in and who she was. You are nothing like her, he said, except in the way that matters most, which is that you don't pretend. He paused. You are entirely yourself, completely, even on the floor, even in the parking lot, even at 2 a.m, in a safe house telling me everything I was doing wrong. You were entirely yourself. I haven't been around that in a long time. He looked at her carefully. It's not grief that keeps bringing me back to you, Evelyn. I want you to know that. It's you. She stood with that. The morning was quiet around them. The neighborhood was starting to move a delivery truck somewhere. A door opening down the block. The particular soft noise of a city resuming itself after a night that most of it had slept through without knowing what was happening in its streets. I have a session with Dr. Ewan on Thursday, she said finally. I know. She thinks another 6 weeks and the cane is optional. I know that too. I want to walk into that diner on the day she clears me. She looked at him. Not because I have to prove anything, not because the neighborhood needs a symbol, because I want to walk back into the place where all of this started and know that I came through it on my own terms. She paused, and I want to do it without anyone watching me like I'm something fragile. I won't be there, he said immediately. She raised an eyebrow. Unless you want me to be, he said. That's the point, your terms. She looked at him for another long moment. Ask me again in 6 weeks, she said. Something in his face settled. Not disappointment, not relief. Something quieter than both. Acceptance of a real answer from a person who meant it. She thought that might be new for him. She thought he might be learning to like it. She turned to go. Evelyn, she stopped. Thank you, he said, for not letting me manage this, for making me say the true things instead of the useful ones. He paused. I don't think I knew how much I needed someone to require that of me until you did. She looked at him over her shoulder. You're welcome, she said simply. She walked, not fast, not performing ease, just walking the way she actually walked, now steadier than she'd been in 2 years. Still imperfect, still her own specific rhythm that accommodated the leg and the cane and the history of a body that had been through something and was coming back from it in its own time. She walked past the corner store and the delivery truck and the woman opening her door down the block who glanced up and nodded, and Evelyn nodded back. She walked to the diner. She hadn't planned to. Her feet just took her there the way they had taken her to work for 2 years through every kind of weather and pain and mourning that had not wanted to cooperate. The diner was open. It was always open by 8. Martha ran a tight schedule, and through the window she could see Lila at the counter and 2 of the morning regulars and the coffee machine running its first full cycle of the day. She stood outside for a moment. She thought about the night of the storm and the door opening and the click of deliberate shoes on tile and Lila's hands shaking and her own body going down before she'd finished deciding to move. She thought about a man crouching on a floor looking at her like she was something he'd lost. She thought about Noah's voice going low and ashamed. She thought about Dr. Ewan saying there it is in Martha's kitchen at 4 a.m, and the way the anger at her brother felt different from the end of love because it was not the end of love at all. She thought about 6 weeks ago when she'd been managing herself down to 60% and calling it responsible. She pushed the door open and walked in. Lila looked up. Her face did the thing it had been doing since the night of the storm, that particular, helpless expression of someone who has been carrying worry about you and is relieved and emotional in equal measure to see you standing upright. Evie, you okay? Getting better every day, Evelyn said. She set her bag down on the counter and tied on an apron that Martha had left hanging on its hook, like it had been waiting. Any tables need clearing. Lila stared at her for a second. Then she grinned the full, genuine, slightly overwhelmed grin of an 18-year-old who was still startled by loud noises and still apologized for things that weren't her fault, but was slowly learning not to. "Table 6, she said, "and the coffee machine needs topping up." "On it," Evelyn said. She moved through the diner, not fast, her pace, her rhythm, her body doing the thing it had been doing for 2 years, that was already different from what it had been 6 weeks ago and would be different again in 6 weeks more. She cleared table 6. She topped up the coffee machine. She took an order from the couple by the window who had been coming in on Tuesday mornings for as long as she'd been working here, and who looked at her this morning with the quiet recognition of people who are glad to see someone they had been worried about. "You're looking better," the woman said. "I am better," Evelyn said, and she meant it with every part of herself. At 10 o'clock her phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Ewan Thursday's session. "I want to try something. No cane for the last 15 minutes. Your call." Evelyn looked at the message, felt a particular complicated mixture of hope and fear that she had stopped pretending was just hope because the fear was real and it deserved to be named. She typed back, "Let's do it." She put the phone in her apron pocket and went back to work. Martha came in from the back at 10:30, stopped when she saw Evelyn moving through the tables and did not say anything for a moment. Just watched. Then she went behind the counter and started the second coffee cycle and got on with the morning, because that was what you did. You got on with the morning, and the doing of it was its own kind of statement, quiet and complete. By noon the diner was full, not because of anything dramatic, not because the neighborhood had decided to make a statement, just because it was lunch and it was Martha's and people were hungry and the food was good and life had continued in the steady, unremarkable, irreplaceable way that life continued when you stopped waiting for permission to live it. Evelyn moved between tables with her cane and her imperfect gait in the specific hard-won ease of a woman who had spent 2 years being managed and was done with it. She took orders and delivered food and refilled coffee and answered the regular questions from the regular people, and when her leg reminded her at 2 in the afternoon that it had opinions, she leaned against the counter for 30 seconds, breathed through it, and kept going. At 3 o'clock, a woman she didn't recognize came in, sat at the counter, and after a moment said, "You're the woman from the story." Evelyn looked at her. "What story?" "The one that went around the neighborhood, about the diner and the man and the—" She gestured vaguely. "Everyone heard a different version. I heard you talked him down. My neighbor heard you made a deal. Someone else said you just fell." She tilted her head curiously. "Which one is true?" Evelyn considered this. "I fell," she said, "and I asked him not to hurt someone." She set a coffee mug in front of the woman. "That's all." The woman looked at her for a moment, and the rest of it, everything that happened after, that Evelyn said is mine. She moved back down the counter. That evening, just before close, she stood in the diner after the last customer had gone and looked at the room at table 4, where a man had once sat with the weight of her city in his hands, at the tile by the counter, where she had hit the floor, at Lila sweeping near the window, who was humming again at Martha, running the end-of-day numbers with the particular calm of a woman who knew her debt was cleared and her door was open and her people were okay. She stood there and felt the full weight of the past 6 weeks, not as something to carry forward, but as something to understand. She had walked into that storm-soaked Thursday as a woman who had made herself as small and safe as possible and called it survival. She was walking out of it as something different, not larger, not louder, not in possession of anything she hadn't already had, just finally completely unapologetically herself. Nobody had saved her. Not Damian Cross with his money and his grief and his slow, hard-won honesty. Not Noah with his fear-driven love. Not Martha with her open door at 4 in the morning. They had been around her when it mattered. They had shown up imperfectly and humanly, and with their own damage showing the way real people showed up. But she had gotten herself off that floor. She had gotten herself through the clinic sessions and the bad mornings and the parking lot and the van door and the conversation with her brother and the safe house and everything in between. She had done it the same way she had done everything in the past 2 years. One step at a time, with her bad leg and her cane and her stubborn refusal to accept that broken was the same thing as finished. She picked up her bag. She walked to the door. She looked back once at the diner at Lila and Martha in the room that had started all of it and felt something settle in her chest that had not been settled in a very long time. Then she pushed the door open and walked out into the evening, and the air was cold and clear. And the city was loud around her in the way cities were always loud, full of its own ongoing business, indifferent to any single story within it. She walked. Her pace was her own. Her ground was solid. And the woman the city had looked at and seen fragility had turned out in the end to be the one thing they hadn't prepared for, the one thing no amount of money or fear or leverage could account for, the one thing that had changed every calculation in every room she'd walked into. She had simply refused to be anything other than exactly who she was. And it had been against all odds more than enough.